And now it's on to me. So for this, go ahead and put your laptop screens down. So we'll open them back up here in a little bit. But want to kick off and intro all of you to the Firebase. So you got to play with Firebase a little bit in the last talk, in the last workshop. But to talk a little bit more about what you can do with Firebase, what you can build with Firebase. And so to kick off, I am Kyle Paul. I'm the North America Regional Lead here at Google, which basically means all the programs that we run here in North America, so the GDG, Women Tech Makers, GDE, DSCs, all these programs I help look after all across North America. So it's a lot of fun. And so it was great getting to meet a lot of you last night at the dinner. And this is where you can follow me on the Twitterverse. Some of you, I think, have already been doing that. My Twitter's been kind of blowing up already, so thank you. And what is the one thing that no presentation is without? I heard it over here. Yes, cats. Yes, perfect. So these are my two little kitties, Penny and Jules. One of the few photos where they're together and playing nice. But yes, so thanks. Yes, you're the first person who's got that right. Awesome. But yes, so no presentation was without cats, so I have to include them. Love them and miss them. And all right, so the first thing, there's two things that you should get out of this talk. Watch me. So part of this talk is to also show you how to run a similar workshop within your DSCs. So after this talk is where we're going to start getting into where we're going to talk about the topic and then how to kind of run it. So again, watch me. That's why I had all of you put your laptop lids down, so that way you're paying attention, seeing how I present, pardon me, how I share the information and bottle it up, kind of thing like that. So watch me. Cool. But we're here to talk about Firebase, right? So this is the second thing, to intro you to Firebase. So this way, when you go back to your DSC clubs and you're talking to your fellow students and how you want to share what awesome things that you learned about Firebase, and when you're working on your projects, maybe you can choose to use Firebase. So quick show of hands, who is brand new to Firebase? Brand new to Firebase, yeah. All right, cool. So who has built something in Firebase? I'm going to say that should be a lot more hands. You guys were just using Firebase in the last workshop. All right, and then, so, ignoring the last workshop, who has used an app that was built on Firebase before today? Before today, all right? Oh, all right, cool. All right. So let's take a quick journey. As a developer, when you're building an application, you have multiple languages that you're dealing with, multiple frameworks. There's all kinds of this hectic mess and spaghetti that you have to get through, right? So as a full stack developer, when, typically as a student, you're kind of learning all the tools of the trade, and you're going through how do databases work, how do servers work, how do I build an authentication? And, the list goes on, connecting to APIs, but really, obviously this is a super simplified version of this, right? It actually looks like this, especially when you get into the real world and you're building applications. There's multiple databases you're connected to, multiple APIs you're connected to. It's, when you're creating an app, you have multiple clients that you're dealing with. So it's not just the back end that's super complex. It's the front end that you're dealing with as well. But, really, in the end, you're building an app, right? So your user doesn't care what the back end is. Your user doesn't know what the back end is. All they want is for it to be fast. They want to open it up and they want it to work. They want it to work offline. So let's say you hop on an airplane and you still want to play that game. So it should work on offline. Or you're on the train or you're going through a tunnel. They don't want to be typing a message and then all of a sudden the app just goes, hey, you're offline and you can't type anymore. That's pretty bad user experience. They also want it to be on all of their devices. They want it to work on Android. They want it to work on iOS. They want it to, some people like to hot swap between devices, every 2 years or something like that. But they also want it to work on their laptop or their tablets. They also want it to be super easy to authenticate. They want to be able to just log in and start using it. And they want it to be secure. They don't want to go through all this hassle of trying to use your app. They just want it to be easy. And as a developer, you also want users. So you want it to be easy for them. So how do you do this? This is where Firebase comes in. So Firebase makes it very easy to build better apps, and they give you tools to improve your app quality and also grow. So some of you are already thinking of startup ideas and like what apps you want to publish, these kind of things. Firebase also gives you these tools on how to grow and scale this as well. So recognize some of these brands in here? They all use Firebase in production. They're using it today. Hundreds of thousands of users going through it today. So as we saw with Jason earlier, Shazam is using it as well. So all kinds of fun apps are already using this in production. The list is much longer. These were just a couple icons I pulled in here, but yeah, cool. And so here's some of the, I mean, it might be a little tiny for some of you, but it's also on the website. Don't worry if you can't read it all. But there's 18 technologies here to help you develop, improve, and grow, as I was talking about. And it's not just mobile apps, it's also web apps. So if you're more of a web developer than an Android or iOS developer, the tools work across both. There's a few things that only work on mobile right now, but just because that's what they're designed and built for. But we're going to look at a couple of tools that we'll be using today in our workshop. And so first, oh, sorry, I forgot I added this slide. Those of you who've heard about Firebase, you know that they recently had a developer summit, and that was in Madrid, Spain, and they announced a new tool called Firebase Extensions. Basically, what extensions are prepackaged functions that enhance your applications that you're building without the need for you to research and write the code. So basically, it's a one-click install to help you resize images. So this way, you don't have to write the whole code to resize the image. Like, let's say you're wanting to do thumbnails. Anytime a user uploads an image, they already have that code pre-written for you. All you do is click install and add it to your application. Done. Very easy. So, and then the list goes on with many other extensions. And they're always looking for feedback on what other extensions they should add. And so you can help build and contribute open source as well. But first, so the first thing that Firebase launched with many, many years ago was the Realtime Database. And this is a cloud-hosted NoSQL JSON database. And so with that JSON database, who's played around with JSON objects before? Yeah, that should be most of us. All right, cool. So with the JSON object database, it's very, very simple, very scalable. It's fast. Whenever data is written, it's synchronized between all the devices in milliseconds, and you can access it directly from the app. So as you write data to the real-time database, it automatically builds that API for you, so that way you can quickly build out your app. And it kind of looks like this. Whenever a user, so the red line is somebody writing to the database, Firebase automatically syncs it with all the other connected clients. And this way, you don't have to worry, your users don't have to refresh, they don't have to load the page again. So as long as they're connected, it instantly updates everybody. And as of the Firebase Dev Summit, they've doubled the concurrent connections that you can have. So you can have 200,000 concurrent connections. So 200,000 users connected all at once being synced up. That's a lot of users, right? So don't worry about breaking it. And then the other database feature that we have is the Cloud Firestore. So with Cloud Firestore, it's very similar to the real-time database where you can store and sync your data at a global scale. The difference is that this is a NoSQL document database. So it's similar to other document collection databases where you have your collections and documents, and there's a whole tree that results from that. But the one thing, the huge advantage with Cloud Firestore is its querying capabilities. So who's more familiar with like a SQL style, so Microsoft SQL, MySQL? Yeah, so those are relational databases. So what Cloud Firestore does is help you more with the the querying to where it's more akin to relational style querying, but it's still not a relational database, so keep that in mind. So you're still querying a NoSQL database, but it's more to that style and more comfortable to users in that sense. The other huge advantage with Cloud Firestore is it syncs data across all devices offline. So whether it's web, Android, or iOS, it syncs offline. So whenever a user happens to disconnect, the library already can help you with that. And once they reconnect, the data will be synced. So you don't have to build any special wrappers for offline syncing or anything like that. It just works. Pretty awesome. The other awesome feature that we have, Firebase authentication. I spoke to a couple last night who've used Firebase authentication. Who's tried to roll their own authentication? Anybody taken that task where you try to build your own email password? Yeah, it's a mess, isn't it? Yeah. To where with an email password, or any type of authentication service, it's not just allowing users to type in an email and password. You also have to get them to register first. And then after you register, you have to have the hashing behind it because you don't want to have plain text passwords in there, do you? No, because that's how iCloud leaks happen, or Sony leaks happen, these kind of things. So we don't want that. So we want to hash it and protect our users. So we don't want these kind of things. But then the other thing is, like when you're trying to integrate with an OAuth service, like Google sign in, Facebook sign in, Twitter sign in, just make it super easy for your users to log in, right? So Firebase makes it very simple. You just click and enable it, and we'll play with this a little bit today in the workshop. It also has an open source UI library. So when you're building a mobile app, you just drag and drop that code, and it helps you build the authentication process within your application as well. The other awesome thing that Firebase authentication does is it protects your data within your Firebase databases, whether you're using Realtime, whether you're using Cloud Firestore, and then some other products that I'll talk about here in a second, or features that I'll talk about here in a second. It helps you secure those to the node level. So basically what that means is only admins can write to this node. So this where that's different with relational databases is you can only secure to the table. You can't secure to that particular cell. So you can secure the record, but you can't secure that cell in the record. You can get down to that node and secure that with the Firebase authentication to the databases. So it's a really, really cool, powerful feature there. And then there's also the Firebase hosting. So this is where you can host static websites. And by static, I mean HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and some simple images. So you don't want to host, if you're doing a photo library or a photo gallery, you don't want to host all your images on there because it's going to make everything super, super slow. You want to use cloud storage. And so with cloud storage, this is where you put your larger files. So your larger images, your PDF files, videos, music, these kind of things. So you want to store them here in the cloud storage. But quickly back here with the hosting, instantly with hosting, it's a global CDN. So it automatically scales, and everybody can reach it globally. The other thing is, it provides you with a free SSL certificate. So it's automatically encrypted. You have the SSL cert with it. It also supports custom domains. So if you want to have your university.com, or that's probably already taken, but DSC University, or however that gets set up, it supports these custom domains. And then back to cloud storage. There it goes. All right. So like the database, you can secure it down to the node. So only certain users can write to this directory. Only certain users have access to these files. So let's say you have a website or an application that is serving up video files, but you only want registered users to be able to download these video files. You can secure it to where only users who have signed in with their Google authentication can download this file. Users that sign in with Facebook can download this other video file, things like that. You can separate even to that extent. And then the other super powerful thing that we have is the Firebase Cloud Functions. Who's used Cloud Functions before? I'm surprised. All of you were just using it in the last workshop. This is a test. Come on. So yeah, okay. So yeah, with the Firebase Cloud Functions, what it is it's a little serverless package that runs in the background to help you, do serverless-like actions with your applications. So this way you don't have to build server-side logic. So if you've done, the C++, or sorry, the Python or PHP or some other backend language, you don't have to do that. You could just use Node.js and write a little mini script, and it'll help you with that process. And what it is it's an event listening process. So what it does is whenever an event triggers it, it's going to run and process whatever you asked it to do, and then it's going to die. It's going to go away. It doesn't exist anymore. So whatever data was happening to be used at that time is no longer accessible. So that also helps keep it secure. So let's say you have a user that signs into your application. So instead of having to handle all of that on your client side, what you do is you just have the login authenticate on the client side. It sends it up to Firebase. Firebase sees that event that, oh, user A logged in. And so the Firebase Cloud Function can catch that, then run some backend code that, let's say we want to grab their profile picture. We want to grab their email address, and we want to save it to this location in the database. This way, the client side doesn't have to do any of this. The client side's already like, I'm already authenticated. I'm moving on to the next thing. And so with Cloud Function, it's processing all that and saving it to the database. We're good to go. And then, there it is. Cool. So like we were messing with a little bit in the last workshop, dialog flow. So here's an example of where Firebase kind of sits in with this. So yes, there's no Firebase logo up here, but what's happening is, so you say, OK, G. It goes, find me a recipe. Yeah, it's saving all of you there. Find me a recipe for homemade cannoli. The Google Assistant picks it up, translates it. Dialogflow picks out the entities and sends those entities to your webhook. And that's where Firebase comes in. Firebase sits as that webhook that translates to a third-party service or another Google API and figures out what that response should be. And then Firebase and the webhook send it back. Here's the one I could find, so you tailor your message, and the response is read back to the user. So Firebase sits in that webhook spot right there. Cool. So now we got a demo. So now you can open up your laptops. Cool. And so we can go ahead. Yes, thank you. Cool. So the link, I already saved you. The link, I made it bigger, and it's not. So it's here. It says bit.ly Firebase sample with a capital F and capital S. So when you go to it, it's just a sample little page. And what it's going to do is it's going to load up this. So, oh, I see. Yeah. So here's an example of what's happening in the back end. So all it's doing is as you load, hit refresh, close it, reopen it, do whatever you want. Yeah, let's rack these numbers up here. Perfect. So what's happening here is the real-time database is logging your user agent. And all it's doing is just outputting to the screen. And then as you leave, there's you probably saw it at the beginning, but way down here now. So you have this past visitors. So what it's doing is as you leave, it's adding to the past visitors and all in real time. So I'm not having to refresh. All you're doing is refreshing, and it's capturing that and bringing it back in here. And this is just using pure vanilla JavaScript. So there's nothing special or magic under the hood. It's just pure vanilla JavaScript. Oh, wow. All of you are pretty after it. Thank you. Cool. Oh, we got a question. Yes. Oh, you want the link? All right. You want to spam me some more? But yeah, so that's essentially just a quick demo of Firebase with the real-time database going in action. But here I'll show you what's actually happened under the hood here. Oops, looks like I'm out of sync here. Let me refresh really quick. All right, cool. So as you see, like, keep hitting it, keep refreshing. All right, so you see how it's blinking, and so yellow means that it's being updated. And so you see how it's ticking up here. So even in the console, you get to see it live updating as well. And so we can see that it's being deleted as they disappear. And then, yeah. So red means disappearing, green means it's new. And so look how fast it's writing these. So we have 200,000 concurrent connections. Unfortunately, we don't have 200,000 DSC leads in the room here right now to try and test that, but all of you are doing a pretty good job at knocking these numbers up. But yeah, so this is just showing you how powerful and how the real-time aspect works. So again, I'm not refreshing this page at all. It's just keeping up with you. So another fun feature, and this code is on my GitHub. So if you want to see how I did it, I could probably demo that. I don't have it opened, I don't think. Yeah, let me open that real quick. And it's here. Cool. Cool, yeah, all right. So what I'm doing here is, so I have this dashboard, which is what that page I was showing you. Is it too small still? A little bit bigger? Oops. All right, is that good enough back there? Everybody can see it? All right, cool. So you can see what I'm doing is, when you're dealing with Firebase, you have these API keys and stuff like that. If you're writing pure JavaScript and you're hosting on Firebase, you don't have to include the keys. You can include the libraries like I have here with the particular version. And so all my keys are hidden in the Firebase console to where it knows my app is authenticated already with hosting. And so it doesn't have to request the API keys again. And then all I'm doing is just very simple, just showing active visitors and showing past visitors. Very, very simple. And then on the page that all of you are hitting is this index page. And so again, I just have my libraries that I'm loading here. And then just the test tracking page. So there's nothing super special behind the scenes. It's just very simple HTML here. And then here's where the magic comes in, though. So we have this dashboard. So yes, I'm using jQuery to help with the swapping of the HTML elements here. So you have your total visitors, active visitors, past visitors. And so just building, and so what I'm just using jQuery for is just to build those list elements that way it shows up in a list. And then so here, yeah, this is a particular one here. So onChild removed. And so this is a Firebase keyword that happens that, so whenever that record is removed from the database, you can listen to that and run a special action. So what I'm doing is I'm just telling it in the jQuery side. So Firebase has said that this particular record was removed from this node in the database. Remove this element from jQuery's DOM. And so it's very, very simple is what's happening here. And so Firebase is just doing the rest of it all under the hood for me here. And where was the other thing? Yeah, and so here's where it's actually tracking. So every time you hit that visitor tracking page, so what you see here it's doing is I'm using the simple push, getting the ref referral key here, setting the visitor ID, and so when it's created a value, I'm grabbing the timestamp, and up here I'm so yeah, here is where I build the visitor object, sorry. So what path arrived at, user agent, and then writing that key. And then whenever you refreshed, you're leaving the page. And so I'm grabbing that as well. So I'm doing the on disconnect. So what's happening there, so Firebase is using WebSockets to keep that connection live, and so that's how it's able to update in real time. And so once you've disconnected that WebSocket, you're able to capture that event. And then so I'm setting the visitor. Now the visitor now belongs to the past visitors. So they're no longer an active visitor. And then obviously just updating this node with a simple counter, +1. So very, very simple, one here. All right, but cool. Any questions about the demo or anything like that? I got 5 minutes, I was just told, so sure. If the count goes over, so that's 200,000 concurrent users, right? So if the count goes over 200,000 concurrent users, that 200,001 won't have access. Like the service will fail. So but that's per second. So they just refresh again, but it's very unlikely that you'll hit 200,000 in per second. So, but if you do happen to hit it, they'll just have to like refresh or make the request again. So there is an opportunity if you're on an enterprise plan with Firebase to extend that. But essentially what happens is companies that need more concurrent connections, it's really just more making their application more efficient. So that way you don't really have 200,000 concurrent users. It's does that user need that live connection at the moment? You can set them on a cached thing, or how that works as they're navigating back and forth, kind of thing. So, but that 200,001 just gets a failed request currently. So, cool. And yes, in the back. How do we what? Try it. Yes. Good luck. So the question was, how do we deal with DDoS? I'm not on the engineering team, nor do I claim to be on our site reliability engineer team. So I can't necessarily talk to how they prevent that. But really, with Firebase, it's globally scalable. So you essentially all you're doing when you try to DDoS me, you're just giving me more servers. So yeah, and running my bill up, I guess, but but yeah, so it's never really going to bring my service down. So to put it simply, my code would fail before Firebase did. So my code would have to be more efficient. But cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
So how does Firebase store, how does that compare to something like MongoDB, which is also NoSQL?
Right. All right. So the question is, how does Cloud Firestore compare to MongoDB? Real time and offline. Those are the two advantages where you get with Firestore. So plus, it's connected to the rest of the Firebase platform, so you get the added security. You get Firebase authentication that helps make it secure. So you have all these other advantages. Yes, it's a NoSQL document collection database. So in the end, that side is relatively very similar. But again, you have the Firebase platform to back you up, the security level, real time, and offline. So good question, though. Cool. Any others? Oh, we got one over here. Yes. Yes, Mike.
So I'm guessing that Firebase is going to be like rolling out included with certain servers in like GCP solutions, and if that comes into when it comes to like biomedical and medical companies, there's a bunch of legal walls that you have to go through. Would that be like dealing with Firebase or dealing with GCP? Because it's like about holding sensitive patient information.
Yes, good question. And I lost the notes the notes laptop. But yeah, so good question here. So the concern is about patient data and data privacy. So with Firebase as well as GCP, it is GDPR compliant, which is more than HIPAA or any of these. So being that we're GDPR compliant in this, I wouldn't worry too much, but it always depends on how you build it, and having somebody dedicated to making sure that that resource is secure. So yes, it's always a very special case when you're dealing with patient data and medical records. So how that all comes together, yeah, you do need auditing, you do need all that stuff. So yes, so we're all Google is doing is providing the resource. It's up to you to keep it secure. So it's only as secure as your code. It's only as secure as the data you put into it. So, and we got 2 more questions here. I think you had your hand up first.
I was just going to ask really quickly, in terms of connecting to other APIs, does the Firebase Auth, when you OAuth in, does that allow you to access other Google Cloud APIs from that user, or is that just for the Firebase connected services?
So the question is, when a user authenticates with your application, so does it allow them access to other Firebase APIs?
Like the other Google Cloud Platform APIs or G Suite APIs, like the one that I was thinking is if you log into a Firebase app, can you use that same login token to go get the user's calendar if they give permission? Or is that...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, because you have access. So it's at their account level. You still have to request access to it.
Right.
So it doesn't just inherently give it to you.
Right.
You have to request access.
But you can, once you get the token, you don't need to build the login system to go connect.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to
Outside.
log in again.
Got it.
Yes. Good question. Good question. And
Thank you. So what's the average latency that we get that we get if I'm using it with Unity, for example, the real-time database, because you're giving too many WebSocket connections for free, which is really tempting. So if I build a multiplayer game with Unity, what's the average latency that you have on that? And also, if the users are in different parts of the world, is Firebase automatically going to decide what server to use, like Europe or something? If I have friends in India playing and I'm playing from the U.S., so how's it going to decide what server to use?
for sure. So the first question is the latency. I've not tried to build with Unity yet, and I won't claim to be an expert in that, so I'll have to look that up, to be honest. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I would assume the latency would be as efficient as your app is, to be short on that. And then the other one is about how does it scale to users globally? Google's data centers is the simple answer on that one. So Google's data centers automatically, as a user is connecting to the resource, it finds and picks the closest data center and that has a Firebase instance and creates an instance and shares all that. So that way everybody's connected and playing in real time. So cool. But so yeah, we'll do one more and then pop into the workshop. So yes, right here.
So is Firebase eventually going to replace App Engine?
I don't foresee it to be because they're two different purposes.
Can you
So-
just, with one sentence, what is the main difference between those two?
So with Firebase, it's a platform. And so that's where, because you have the static hosting, you have the databases, you have analytics, you have authentication. So Firebase has all of these things to it. With App Engine, it's another serverless offering, but it allows you to run other backend code. So you can run your PHP, Go, Java, Python, and Node.js as well. But so it's more of a backend as a service rather than a platform as a service. So they're kind of serving two different purposes there. But yeah, so I don't see one replacing the other in that sense. But cool. Alrighty. So next, everybody go here. So get your laptops up. Yep. So now is the workshop time. Oh, you want to see the latest numbers? Everybody was hammering away. Oh goodness. Nice work. Wow. Great job, everyone. Alrighty. So Firebase for Web, capital F, capital W on here. And so this will be the workshop that we'll be running through. And let me know when you're ready. And so with this workshop, what I did last night, I scouted out a couple volunteers that are seated, hidden amongst you, that will help us on this workshop. So if you happen to get stuck, just raise your hand, and the closest one will come and help you pass that next step. So will my volunteers raise their hand? The ones I talked to. So yes, we have Danny, we have Stephanie, we have Nikhil, we have Jason. Oh, you're Nikhil, sorry. Nikhil, and where was the hand back here? Jason, yes, there you are. So these are our volunteers that'll help. So the closest one, so now you know where they are, and so just raise your hand if you get stuck at any point, because it's a simple workshop, but we'll just truck right on through, so that way we're conscious of the time. And so you should land on this page like this. And so essentially what we're going to be building is a meetup-esque kind of app where just authenticate users, and then we're going to sync using Cloud Firestore, build some security rules into that database, and then deploy it on Firebase hosting. So a lot of the tools I was talking about earlier in my talk, we're actually going to use them. So I'm really excited for this. So without further delay, we go in here, get the starting code. So we have this link right here, if everybody sees that, right? So you click that link, and it opens up a page like this. So everybody should see something similar to what I got here. So you click that link, and then it says to click the fork button. So it's a blue fork button right up here. So everybody see that? And so we're going to fork the project. So this way, we already have the starting code template to go through, and our own version of that code. So everybody good? We're still able to click the fork button? Oh, the link to the workshop. Here. Firebase for web. All right. We golden? All right. Cool. So on next, we're going to edit some information. So some of the starting materials. So basically, we want to open the index HTML file, locate the event details container and the description container, and edit some of those details that are in there. So it's already pre-filled in with some. But so we go to the index HTML, and it wants us to edit. Let's change this to San Jose. And so you see in real time, without having to refresh or save or anything like that, it automatically changed it to San Jose for me. So it's just kind of showing how quickly that works there. So change it, whatever other things you want in here. I want to call this a Google Meetup. And now it's a Google Meetup, or we can call it our USA DSC Meetup. And so you can quickly modify and just play, and so what this step is doing is just really getting you used to this interface to show, here's your code, here's how to edit code, and here's the window where you see code being displayed. All right. So great job. Now we're moving on to the next step. Cool. So now we want to create and set up a Firebase project. So those of you who've logged into Firebase as of the last workshop, we're going to do it again. So you can click the Sign into Firebase button here. And then it says Add Project. And then we want to call it something like Firebase Web Code Lab, or if you don't have a name for that already. So we're going to call it Firebase. So I'm going to call mine Firebase for Web. And then continue. And, I guess I have to accept everything. All right. So it's going to take a second to build all the features here. And then once that's built, ooh, somebody beat me to it. All right. It's thinking about it. All right. So don't feel you have to wait on me if you're going ahead through the steps. But I'm just going to work through it and make sure that we have everything set up. So we're going to be using Firebase authentication, Cloud Firestore, security rules, and Firebase hosting. And so there we go. So my project is ready. And so I want to go in to develop it. And then on authentication here, is that large enough for everybody to see? I could probably bump it up. Yeah, let me bump it up a little bit. All right. And so to enable your email password, so you come over here to sign in method and you see that all of these are disabled. So you see that the other thing is how I was talking about how there's all these different awesome ways to sign into your application. We have a bunch of them here to where, let's say like with Twitter, for example. With Twitter, all you need is the API key and the API secret key that Twitter provides, and it just automatically enables everything for you. You don't have to process and do everything that the Twitter API says you have to do. Google's already baked in a lot of that code for you, which is really awesome. But today we're just going to be doing email password. And, ooh, I don't know if it said that one. Yes, we want to leave the password list sign-in unchecked. And then save that. And then we come back over and enable Cloud Firestore. So that's the other thing. So like a lot of these Firebase features aren't turned on by default. You have to go in and manually turn them on. So that way you're only using the resources that your application needs. So this way you're not just using all the things when you don't need it. So back over here on database. And then we want to create, and then we want start it in test mode. So that's the other thing. So whenever you're starting a project, it's okay to start it in test mode, but do not publish anything that's in test mode because that's how people get your data. So, because right now what it does is it just defaults the database authentication, the security rules to allow anybody to read or write from it, which is okay for the first beginning steps that we'll be doing here. And then so we'll just go ahead and pick US Central, leave it default. And then it's going to provision us the Cloud Firestore. So walked you through these steps. Cool. Alrighty, now we need to configure it. So give it a minute here. So yeah, so in our index.js file, we'll want to add the Firebase UI and Firebase libraries to it. And so we need to add this to the index.js file. So our index.js file is here. So if you're ahead of me, awesome. So you can see it's already importing our authentication in Firestore and the Firebase UI here. And let's see, all right, cool, this is ready. Perfect. All right, and so we want to add Firebase to the project. And where was that at? Sorry. There we go. Project overview, open it here in the top, and then we want to add it to our website. And so we need to register our app. So I'm going to call mine Firebase for web. And we want to set up hosting and register it. All right, and we can use this friendly copy icon down here, and it's going to copy everything for us. And so we registered it. Now we want to copy it and add it to just below our body tag in a script block. So over here, well, apparently we don't have a body tag in here. Sorry. Script. Oh, it's already. There's that. And we go and grab it from, so there's that. Where is the, oh, okay. So it looks like the code lab is a little out of sync on here because we don't need to have the API keys since we're just doing JavaScript and hosting it on Firebase. So we're using the same thing that I talked about in my demo on how we just went ahead and included the library, and it's going to go ahead and do all that for us. And then let's see. Where? I'm sorry. Why is... Yeah, I think this is, it looks like they changed it on me. I just ran through this the other day.
Do you have to pull it out of the environment variables or something?
It shouldn't have to be. Let me back up here and say that, nope. All right. That's right. All right. So, but this is still the config. All right. So here it is. All right. Cool. So basically, what thank you for catching me up there. So we're over here at Firebase for Web. You click on the little cog over here to get to the settings. And down here, we click on config. And then we can copy this config. And it wants us to add it to the index.js file. Where it says paste below here. So right here on line 27. I'm going to change that back to var, just to match the lab. Cool. All right. Everybody still with me on this one? It was a little tricky there. All right. And then, so we'll go ahead and on to the add user sign in. So this is where we authenticate our users. So we can go to our index.js file, and at the bottom, we add this statement here to initialize the Firebase UI widget at the bottom of the index.js file. Ooh. Oh, it looks like it's already there too. So we could have just uncommented it. And then we want to add the RSVP button to the HTML. So back on the indexed HTML file, we go to the event details container, and we have the, all right, so back here, oh, let's go ahead and save this on here. Index HTML, and then we want it, where did it say again? Event details container. So it's right with the Firebase Auth container here. All right. Ooh, looks like I have an error already.
In index.js, you have to uncomment the initialization. Right up there at 38.
Ah, thank you. I missed that step. Perfect, thank you. So now you see we have our RSVP button here on the side. And then, so yeah, so if you have a larger, non-zoomed in, non-scrunch screen like mine, you should see something like this. The other fun thing that you can do here is you're able to open this in a new window. so that way you can view it full screen. So there's this open and new window over here on the side. And then we need to add a listener to the RSVP button. So at the bottom, we want to add this to our index.js file, the event listener to listen for a click on that button. So we can go ahead and drop that here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this code a little bit. So it's going to listen to RSVP clicks for us. All right, and then, so in the users tab, back over here on Firebase, we go to authentication, and we're looking at the users, and so you'll see what happens as users sign in here. So when you click RSVP, you see that I'm putting in an email address. So I'm going to do so you see how the widget's already kind of populating everything for me. And then I'm going to choose a password. Chrome gave me an awesome super encrypted one. I click on save. So see, Firebase built all that for me. All I did was just add the button. And so Firebase saved it for me. And if I refresh over here, you'll see that I have a user now. And so I'm able to see the email address that I signed in with. It shows me an icon that means that the user signed into the application with the email password. It would be a G if they signed in with Google. It would be an F if it signed in with Facebook. So it would use the different icons. So it would be the bird if they signed in with Twitter and so on. And then you have their secret user ID so anytime this user now writes to the database, this is the ID that you can store that record belongs to this user. So that's a super awesome fun part there. And then obviously the created date is the created date, but the sign-in date will change every time that user signs in. So you're able to see, you know how some applications show you when you last signed in? You're able to pull that from here as well. Alrighty. So we authenticated. And then now we want to add a state to the UI. So we want to add the auth state to the bottom of our JavaScript file. So yes, it's faster to copy paste, but if you want to practice typing it out, I suggest you do that. I'm up here, so I'm going to copy paste. And so now you can see that automatically, being that it refreshed, it gives me the state. It updated my state to log out because it knows my current state is that I'm logged in. And then we'll add our listener code here to replace the current event listener. So that way, when I click it again, it's not going to ask me to log in again. It's going to actually help me log out. So now when I log out, it's actually going to log me out and switch back to the RSVP button. So when I log in, I sign in again. But the thing is, I already signed in once. Why is it asking me to sign in again? So bless you. So are we good on this step? Everybody still with me or ahead of me? Perfect. See, I knew this would be an easy lab. Oh. Cool. Now, how do we write data to Firestore? So basically, all we just did was write data to the authentication service, but we haven't actually tied in the database yet. So this is really what our data model is going to look like. So we're going to have a guest book. And so whenever the user writes a message, it's going to store it in a document collection. And so that document is going to have a name, text, timestamp, and user ID. And so remember how I said that user ID that gets automatically generated for the user? This is where we're going to store it and relate it back to that user. And so when we add messages to Firestore, we need a section for them to write a message in the first place. So we're going to add that to our guestbook container over on our index.html file. Save this. Oops. Cancel. All right, so our guestbook container is here. So I want to update that. Excuse me. So you see we have our little guestbook container down here towards leave a message and a send button, but we now need to give some power to that button. So yeah, so it's the same here, but now we're going to listen for the form submission. And so here in the form submission, to kind of step through this a little bit, similar how I did on the Realtime Database. So you're referencing the Firebase SDK right here. You're telling it to use Firestore. You're telling it which collection to use. So you're giving it the guestbook collection. And then you're using the keyword add, and then creating the document here. And again, the document is the text, timestamp, name, and user ID. And you write it. And so, yeah. So we're going to add this here. And the downside with the copy paste, I mean, you're not necessarily seeing everything. You're just getting to the result. But definitely look at how we're using it. And so, like up here, noting that Firebase right here, again, we're referring to the Firebase SDK that's already loaded. We're telling the Firebase SDK to use the auth part of the SDK. We're telling it to grab the current user and get that current user's ID. Because the other thing we could do is get current user's name, or we could get current user.email. So we can reference other things here. It's like up here, right here, we're using display name. So you're able to build off of that object. So that's going to be at the bottom of our index.js. All right, cool. Any questions about the code so far? All right. And so the other thing we want to do is this guestbook is only going to show to signed in users. And so we're looking at the Firebase SDK again. We're telling it to use the authentication part of the SDK. And then we're looking at the auth state changed. And so from the auth state changed, we're going to pass in our user. And if user, meaning logged in, because over here on our index.js, we create the user. Where are we at? Yeah. So we're passing the user along, and so that way we're testing the state of the user. Auth state changed right here. So we're updating our get current auth state here on line 71. So it's going to block. So since I'm not signed in, we no longer see the ability to write to the guestbook. If I had written anything, it would also not show anything that's been written already. Alrighty. And so we can test sending messages. Let me get back in. Cool. And so now you see that I have the discussion. Hey there, DSC leads. Boom. So, bless you, yes. All right, so back over here on our database. You see that we have the guestbook record that was automatically created. So I didn't have to go in and create that collection. As you write to Firebase, it automatically builds that for you. And so it generated the document ID and then wrote it here. And so, hey there, DSC leads. So everything automatically happened there. Cool. And so now we want to synchronize these messages. So we want these messages to listen for newly added messages and display them on the UI. So how I was using jQuery on my demo that I showed earlier, we're going to build a similar version to that. And so we want to update our guestbook container to show. I don't want to do all of that, though. So we just want this one section here in the guestbook container underneath the form. And that is, where's our guestbook container? There it is. So underneath the form is where we add that. And then in our index.js file, so what we're doing here is we're asking Firebase to go find these messages and bring them and display them back to our users. So again, Firebase SDK, referencing Firestore, using the collection, because you have to give it the ID. If you don't give it the ID, it blows up. So you refer to guestbook, and then here is part of the querying. So we're telling it to order by timestamp, and we're giving it a descending. So this way, it's going to show our messages in a descending order. And then you have to use on snapshot, because what happens is after you've made this request, the data comes back as a snapshot. And so once you've queried it out of Firebase, you have this snapshot of data, and that's what you have to work with. You can't query on it again. So what we're going to do is reset the page. So reset to the inner HTML, and then loop through and display them with our name and our text from that document. So that's going to be at the bottom of our index.js. Oops, over here. Cool, and that'll update. And so if I add another message that says go DSC, so you'll see that populates to the top because we're in descending order. And it real time happened because I just hit submit and it instantly showed up. What? Firebase. So we've tested that, and I'm at 1 minute left, so I'm going to buzz through the security rules here. Do not buzz through security rules, but I'm going to have to because I have to finish up. So here's where you go to set up Firebase security rules. So in the database, you'll see you have data, rules, indexes, and usage. So usage is back to where just showing you, so to the question of how many users are using it, and if somebody's trying to DDoS me, all this kind of stuff. So you can see what's happening here with your usage. But over here in rules is where we want to set everything up. And so our rules are all set up in here. And so what does it want us to do? So basically in our rules, it wants us to identify and match that our security rules. So let's go down here. So we're going to add a version 2 of our rules. And once I copy this over, I'll talk through that real quick. So I update that. All right, so see right here, so even though I've pasted the rules, it hasn't actually saved it yet. I have to actually publish them for them to go live. And so what's happening here is I'm telling it that in Firestore, and you're using the curly brackets as a way to any collection gets these rules. So I don't have to reference a particular collection. You can if you want to secure down to that collection, but what I'm doing here is saying that any collection with documents, and then it goes in and matches the guest book. So guest book is going to populate back up there, and then any entry. And so it's allow read if authentication is not null. So meaning that the user has to be signed in. So this is another way. So on the UI side, we've already protected it saying that the user has to be logged in to be able to see it. But now also on the data side, we've protected it to where you have to be logged in order to read that data. And then allowing write if the user ID is the same user that's logged in. This is what's happening here. So we can go ahead and publish that. And some validation rules. So how much time do I got left? Am I out? I'm out? All right. So essentially, go ahead and work through the rest of this. I don't want to keep you from lunch, but yeah. So if I can quickly just go back to the slides really quick. But yeah, I'll be around to talk to you more. But a lot of the stuff that I was demoing today. I'll be around if you want to talk more and have more questions. If you want to learn more about what was in the presentation, I have a fancy link here. If you want to do more code labs on Firebase, which include web, Android, iOS, IoT, ads, we have a Google Assistant. There's all kinds of code labs that bring in Firebase. So we have that there. So 3, 2, 1, switch. All right. So thank you. That's Firebase. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. And again, that's me on the Twitterverse.